You show up on your first day wearing a suit you bought specifically for this occasion, walking into 200 West Street like you're entering something that was designed to make you feel the weight of where you are. Because it was. Goldman Sachs didn't build this lobby for its employees. It built it for its clients. The distinction matters, and you won't understand why for several years. Your analyst class is 55 people. Harvard, Wharton, Princeton, a few state schools where someone finished first in everything. Everyone has the same resume shape, the grades, the internships, the one line that signals you can operate under pressure. Everyone got through the interviews. Everyone is standing in the same lobby thinking the same thing, that they earned this, that they're different, that they were selected for a reason. Goldman didn't hire you because you're exceptional. It hired you because you're capable of becoming identical. You don't know that yet. The training program lasts 6 weeks. You sit in a conference room on the 41st floor with 54 other people who all arrived with the same posture, straight-backed, attentive, performing competence for an audience of their peers. You learn financial modeling, LBO analysis, DCF valuation, comparable company analysis spreadsheets that project what a business is worth based on assumptions that are sophisticated in their construction and fundamentally speculative in their conclusions. You learn to build pitch books, those dense, leather-covered presentations that make a strategic recommendation look like the only rational outcome of serious thought. You learn the language, EBITDA, accretion dilution, leveraged buyout, book building. Words that mean something specific inside 200 West Street and function as noise everywhere outside it. Here's what nobody tells you during those 6 weeks. Goldman doesn't train you to think. It trains you to produce. The distinction feels abstract when you're in a room learning Excel shortcuts. It won't feel abstract later. You're assigned to a group, maybe mergers and acquisitions where every deal is an acquisition of something and a disposal of something else. Maybe leveraged finance, where the product is debt structured precisely enough to look like strategy. Maybe the financial institutions group, which finances the banks and insurance companies that finance everyone else, and which exists in a layer of complexity that takes 6 months just to understand at a surface level. The group is your world now. Your managing director has been at the firm for 16 years and has the specific quality of someone who stopped being surprised by anything around year 5. Your associate is 3 years removed from where you're sitting and somehow still functional. Your fellow analysts become your closest relationships, not by choice, but by the arithmetic of available hours. Goldman's internal name for the firm is the firm capitalized. It is not ironic. The Goldman brand operates like a gravitational field. It pulls your professional identity toward it and holds it there. That's the first thing the training program actually teaches you, though it never states it directly. You arrive at 8 in the morning. You leave when the work is done, which is not a figure of speech and was never meant to be. Midnight is a reasonable night. 2 in the morning is normal. There is a car service that takes you home, black sedans that wait outside the building in a line. And this is listed in the offer letter as a benefit, which is technically accurate. You learn to sleep during the 20-minute ride to your apartment because that might be the only uninterrupted rest available before your phone starts again. You keep a suit hanging behind your office door. You keep a toothbrush in your desk drawer next to a phone charger and a spare dress shirt still in the dry cleaning bag. You stop unpacking these things because you stop thinking of the office as somewhere you visit. What nobody tells you during recruiting is what the job actually is. They talk about deal flow, client relationships, the Goldman network, the caliber of transactions. What you actually do is make slides. The associate marks up your deck at 10 p.m. with comments that come as a track changes file. You make the changes. The VP reviews it and decides the narrative flow is wrong. You restructure it. The managing director sees it the morning of the client meeting and wants a different approach to the opening pages. You rebuild it. This happens at midnight. The meeting is at 8 the next morning. Your analyst base salary is $110,000. Goldman pays above the street. It seems real until you divide it by the hours a busy week runs to 100. Sometimes more, and the number you arrive at is somewhere below $21 an hour. The security guard in the lobby earns more on an hourly basis than you do. Most analysts do this calculation once and don't return to it. The deal is what comes next. And what happens to deals is a different education entirely. Your group is advising on an acquisition. A healthcare company wants to buy a competitor, consolidate market share, realize synergies. The language is precise even when the logic underneath it is not. You spend 6 weeks on the model, the LBO analysis, the synergy case, the accretion dilution schedule. You build in 3 scenarios. The base case is defensible. The model is clean. The deal falls apart because the two chief executives have a conversation at a dinner you were not present for, and afterward the process is terminated. 6 weeks of your life, gone because of a personal dynamic that no financial model is designed to measure. Sometimes deals close. Your group advises on a merger that actually completes. You see Goldman's name in the press release and there's a brief moment, half a second, maybe of something that feels like pride, before you remember that your specific contribution to this transaction was rebuilding the disclosure appendix at 3 a.m, 2 days before signing. Still, the deal closed. The client made several $billion. Goldman earned approximately $75 million in advisory fees on a transaction of that size. Your base salary is $110,000. You do the math, and then you stop doing the math. The analyst class thins. Some people leave quietly. You notice an empty desk one Monday, and no one discusses it. One analyst takes a hedge fund offer and is gone by the end of the month. Another stops responding to messages and simply doesn't return. The people who stay aren't the most talented members of the class. That's not what determines it. What keeps you here is something that takes a while to name. The growing awareness that leaving now would mean the last 2 years happened for no reason. So you stay to give the suffering a retroactive purpose it may not actually have earned. You've been here 2 years. The question has arrived. Business school feels like parole. You get into Wharton, not Columbia, not Booth. Wharton says yes, and that's sufficient. Suddenly you have weekends. You sit in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning for no operational reason and realize you've forgotten what that feels like. Your classmates talk about work-life balance as though it's a standard feature of adult employment rather than a rare structural condition. You listen and nod and feel underneath the relief, something you weren't expecting. You miss it, not the hours or the rebuilding of decks at midnight. You miss the stakes. You miss the feeling that what you're working on is consequential to someone. Even if that someone is a corporation trying to acquire a competitor for reasons that are partly strategic and partly about the CEO's legacy. Normal jobs feel slow, low consequence, like a version of professional life with the volume turned down to a level you can't work at anymore. The intensity was the drug, not just the compensation. Business school shows you this about yourself. The information is not entirely comfortable. 2 years pass. You return to Goldman as a first-year associate. Base salary $250,000 above street. The analysts look at you the way you used to look at associates, like you are simultaneously something to aspire to and evidence of something they don't yet want to examine too closely. Now you're on the client calls. You're the one negotiating disclosure language with lawyers at midnight. Your assumptions go into the model, which means you are accountable when the assumptions prove incorrect. You date someone who works in marketing at a company that closes at 6. She doesn't understand why you can't leave when everyone else does. You explain. She stops believing the explanation. The relationship ends in a conversation that takes 11 minutes. The hours don't improve. You just get paid more for them. They make you vice president in your 3rd year as associate. The title sounds like an arrival until you learn there are thousands of vice presidents at Goldman Sachs. Then it sounds like what it actually is. A grade, not a destination. You are middle management inside an institution that has never been sentimental about middle management. The real objective is managing director. Above that partner, both of those are still years away, if they happen at all. But here's what the VP level gives you that the levels below it didn't. You can see the machinery now. As an analyst and associate, you were too junior to understand what was actually happening above you. You could observe the outcomes but not the mechanics. Now you watch it happen in real time. There is a managing director on your floor who presents a deal structure to the client as his own thinking. A VP on his team built the entire framework over 3 weeks and is not mentioned. There is a senior VP who has been passed over for MD candidacy 2 years in a row and has quietly begun managing his junior staff in ways that protect his positioning rather than develop theirs, not obviously, not in writing, just in the specific texture of how credit gets assigned on the deals he touches. There is a Goldman partner who generates $200 million in annual revenue and is therefore permitted to operate by rules that don't visibly apply to anyone else on the floor. You watch all of it. You learn which observations are worth acting on and which ones will cost you more than they resolve. At this level, the VP who projects confidence gets the client meetings. The VP who projects uncertainty gets the internal projects no one wanted. Perception is nearly indistinguishable from reality. That's not a critique of the system. It's an operational description of how it works. There were 55 analysts in your class. Roughly 12 came back as associates, perhaps 6 made VP. The number who will make MD is smaller than that. You are in too deep to pretend the narrowing doesn't apply to you. There is a rank at Goldman Sachs that doesn't exist at most firms. Executive Director. It sits between Vice President and Managing Director, and it is the most candid title the institution will ever give you, because what it actually means is, we are still evaluating. You run deals at MD intensity. You carry client relationships. The criteria for advancement are not published anywhere you can find, and the timeline is not guaranteed. And you will know when a decision has been made because someone will call you into a room. The moment arrives around year 10. Nobody discusses it openly, but everyone who has stayed long enough has experienced some version of it. You are at your desk at 1 in the morning, not unusually late. Just normally late, and the floor is half lit. The overhead lights on the far end switched off hours ago, and there are 6 or 7 other people still at their stations in the same silence, running the same kinds of models, waiting on the same kinds of comments. And you understand something you have been successfully deferring for a long time. This is not the initiation period. There is no point at which the conditions improve structurally. The deprivation is not a temporary state you are passing through on the way to something more sustainable. This is the job, and it has always been the job, and the people above you knew that when they recruited you. Some people have this realization and leave within the month. You are not in that group. You examine the exit options with the rigor you'd apply to a deal. Private equity exists, but private equity means a different architecture of pressure, not less of it. Corporate development means a significant pay cut, and the specific risk of being eliminated when the company you've just joined becomes an acquisition target. You stay. You submit your name for MD candidacy. You tell yourself that 10 years was the investment, and this is where the return materializes. You believe this. You have to. The alternative is admitting that you have already paid the full price for a destination you haven't yet fully examined. Managing Director. Year 13. Base salary $650,000 and a bonus that in a good year reaches into 7 figures. Sometimes multiple millions if the deal flow holds and the revenue numbers close above projection. You are finally one of the people operating the machine rather than being operated by it. The VPs and associates and analysts do the construction work while you manage the client relationships, originate the transactions, and navigate political currents at an altitude the junior staff can't observe from where they sit. But here's what nobody tells you about making MD. The stress doesn't decrease. It changes form. As an analyst, the stress was about output. Could you produce fast enough, accurately enough, with enough anticipation of what your superiors wanted before they asked for it? As a managing director, the stress is about revenue. You are now responsible for bringing in business, not executing someone else's. If a client relationship migrates to a competitor, that is a direct reflection on you. If your group has a difficult year in a difficult market, your name appears on the wrong list. You have watched managing directors leave the firm after a single bad year. The conversation that ended their tenure lasting less than 30 minutes and explaining very little. The institution carries no memory of what you built in the years before that year. It carries only the current number. Above MD is partner. There are approximately 400 partners at Goldman Sachs, out of more than 40,000 employees globally. That is less than 1%. The path to partnership is described internally in terms of franchise, meaning the client relationships that are specifically yours. The revenue that would follow you personally if you left. Goldman does not make you a partner because you are excellent. Excellence is the floor, not the ceiling. It makes you a partner if you have built something the institution cannot afford to lose. You are 36 years old, 13 years at this firm. You have enough money that you could leave tomorrow and be financially stable for the rest of your life. That is an accurate statement. You have done the calculation. But leaving now would mean that all of it the analyst years, the car rides home at 2 in the morning, the relationship that ended in 11 minutes, the decade of weekends that dissolved into conference rooms was simply the cost of entry to a place you chose not to stay. The money is real. The freedom it represents is theoretically real. What is also real is that walking away from MD feels, in some specific and difficult to articulate way, like losing. So you don't leave. The new analyst class arrives next week. Someone asks if you'll speak to them at orientation. You say yes. The orientation room holds 55 people. You stand at the front of it and give them the speech about excellence in client service and the Goldman standard. The same speech that was given to you 13 years ago in a room that looked almost identical to this one. You tell them this career will challenge them in ways they cannot yet anticipate. You tell them the network they're entering will shape the rest of their professional lives. You don't tell them what it will cost, because that information is available and they have already decided it doesn't apply to them. You didn't listen either. No one does. That's not a failure of information. It's the nature of the selection process. The people who would be deterred by the honest version don't get through the interviews. After the session, you walk back through the Analyst bullpen. The desks are new, the monitors slightly larger than the ones you remember, but the configuration is identical. Someone in a suit they bought specifically for this week is building their first LBO model, tabbing between Excel windows with the focused inefficiency of someone who hasn't yet learned the shortcuts. You were that person. You had that exact posture, that specific combination of anxiety and certainty that you were somewhere that mattered. You want to tell him something true about what this building extracts from the people inside it over time, about what the compensation compensates for and what it doesn't, about the relationships that become casualties of a schedule that has no structural respect for anything outside itself. But you don't say anything because he wouldn't hear it, and because you are not entirely certain you have the standing to deliver a warning you didn't take when it was available to you. The machine keeps running, deals close and fall apart, markets expand and contract. Analyst classes arrive at 55 and thin to the few who make MD, who eventually stand in the front of orientation rooms telling the next group about excellence and the Goldman standard. Somewhere in the city tonight, a college senior is editing their resume, practicing answers to the questions they know will come in the first round, convinced that they will navigate this differently than everyone who came before them. They won't. Nobody does. That's what makes the system work.